Have you ever felt like the world is moving on without you, leaving you behind in solitude? You try to connect, but the bonds seem to break and the silence grows louder. It feels as if Allah is pulling you away from everyone and everything. But why? My dear brothers and sisters, this isolation is not a punishment. It is preparation. Allah isolates those He chooses to refine, protect, and guide towards something far greater. Today, we will explore 7 profound reasons why Allah isolates the chosen ones. These reasons carry a wisdom that most of us fail to see. Before we begin, reflect on this. What if the loneliness you feel is Allah's way of calling you closer to Him, away from the noise of the world? Let's uncover how this isolation could become the greatest blessing of your life. Reason 1. Isolation protects your heart. Have you noticed how, when you're surrounded by people, your heart can easily get distracted, caught up in fleeting conversations, worldly comparisons, or even harmful influences? Allah sometimes pulls you away, not to punish you, but to protect your heart. If I hope answered to an invitation or selection, I need to return to my home quickly, if not straight away. I would go farther than to put it that way, and it's this instinct that suppresses my desire. If I accept, think of a precious gem. To preserve its shine, you keep it away from anything that could scratch or dull it. That's your heart. Allah sees its potential and knows that being around certain people or environments could corrode its purity. Imagine this. You've been surrounded by friends or colleagues who subtly mock your deen or encourage you to stray from it. You start to compromise, just a little here, a little there. Then suddenly, those same people drift away, leaving you confused and hurt. Yet, in hindsight, wasn't Allah saving you from something that could harm your connection with Him? Did you know? The heart is mentioned over 130 times in the Quran, emphasizing its importance as the seat of faith and sincerity. Protecting it is an act of devotion. Let this isolation remind you of the "So do not weaken and do not grieve, and you will be superior if you are true believers." Quran 3:13-9. The loneliness you feel is actually a space for Allah to fill with His love, guidance, and peace. Reason 2. Isolation refines your character. Have you ever noticed how, when you start working on yourself, the noise of the world seems to fade? It's as if Allah is deliberately removing distractions, unnecessary chatter, and even people who might not align with your path. Why? Because isolation is Allah's way of refining you. When surrounded by noise, constant opinions, meaningless distractions, or unhealthy relationships, it becomes nearly impossible to hear your own thoughts, let alone connect deeply with Allah. Solitude strips away these layers, forcing you to confront who you really are and what truly matters. Let me ask you, have you ever felt this before? In the quiet, uncomfortable moments of being alone, you suddenly see parts of yourself you didn't want to face. Maybe it's a habit you've been ignoring, or a weakness you've been hiding. Allah isolates you not to punish you, but to help you grow. Reflect on this. The Prophet Muhammad often withdrew to the cave of Hira before receiving revelation. Those moments of solitude weren't just physical isolation, they were spiritual preparation. In the same way, your moments of isolation could be Allah's way of preparing you for something greater. Reason 3. Isolation strengthens your relationship with Allah. Have you ever felt like no one truly understands what you're going through? Even when you try to explain, the responses don't resonate? This feeling isn't random, it's a divine invitation. When Allah isolates you, it's His way of drawing you closer to Him. In times of ease, we often rely on people, friends, family, or material comforts. But in solitude, when those crutches are removed, you're left with the one who has been there all along. Allah. Did you know The word alone is used in the Quran to describe Allah's unmatched greatness, reminding us that He is sufficient for us. But secondly, the word has such a profound effect that exercise can act as a counter-war practice. How many times have you turned to Allah with your whole heart, tears flowing, only when you felt you had no one else? Isolation forces this deep reliance. It's as if Allah is saying, "Come to me, let me be enough for you." Remember, this isn't about separating yourself from the Ummah. Islam is about unity. This journey of isolation is about spiritual transformation, preparing you to contribute to the Ummah in a stronger, more meaningful way. Reason 4. Isolation is a training ground. Every time you're about to grow, something or someone is removed from your life. Have you noticed this pattern? Maybe it was a friendship you thought was unbreakable or a support system you leaned on for years. And now, suddenly, it's gone. Why? Isolation isn't rejection, it's refinement. Allah removes distractions and attachments that could cloud your path. It's His way of sharpening your focus and teaching you lessons you couldn't learn in comfort. Consider Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him. When he was thrown into the well, he was isolated and stripped of his family's support. But that isolation wasn't abandonment. It was preparation. In the silence of that well, and later in prison, Yusuf, peace be upon him, was being molded into a leader. By the time he emerged, he was a man of extraordinary wisdom, resilience, and faith. Question to reflect: what if the challenges you're facing now are your training ground? What if Allah is preparing you for something far greater than you can see today? Remember, diamonds are formed under pressure, and the finest swords are forged in fire. The struggles you face in isolation are the tools Allah uses to refine you. Reason 5. Allah's plan requires patience. Have you ever felt like your life is in a holding pattern, as if the progress you crave is just out of reach? You're not alone. Many of Allah's prophets and chosen ones faced delays and waiting periods. These moments weren't wasted, they were pivotal. Patience is one of the most emphasized virtues in Islam. The Quran repeatedly reminds us, "Indeed, Allah is with the patient." Quran chapter 2 verses 15 through 18. Your isolation might feel endless, but it's a test and a preparation. When you emerge, you'll see that the waiting was never in vain. If you're feeling alone right now, let this be a reminder. Allah hasn't forgotten you. Instead, He's crafting you into the person He knows you can be. Embrace this isolation as an opportunity to draw closer to Him, refine your character, and prepare for the greatness He has planned for you. Maybe you're watching others move forward while you seem to be stuck. It's frustrating, isn't it? But let me tell you this: Allah's delay is not His denial. Sometimes He places you in isolation because He's preparing something far greater for you. The waiting period isn't wasted time. It's an essential part of the process. Think of it as a cocoon. Just as a caterpillar must endure stillness to emerge as a butterfly, your isolation is a phase of transformation. Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, experienced this before he was called to lead his people. He spent years away from Egypt, herding sheep in the wilderness. To many, that may have looked like a step backward, but in reality, it was the exact preparation he needed to become. Here's a question for you. What if the waiting is where Allah is working the most in your life? What if this time is about strengthening your faith, sharpening your skills, and clearing the distractions that would have held you back? Patience doesn't mean passivity. It's an active trust in Allah's timing. It's about using this period to build yourself spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, so that when the moment comes, you're ready to step into what Allah has planned for you. Remember, Allah knows the perfect time for everything. What feels like a delay to you is part of His divine design. The pause isn't punishment, it's preparation. Reason 6. Isolation refines your intentions. Sometimes being alone can feel unbearable. The silence, the solitude, it can make you question everything. But here's the hidden truth. Isolation is where your intentions are purified. When you're surrounded by people, their opinions, judgments, and expectations can cloud your heart. You might find yourself doing things to seek their approval, even unconsciously. But when Allah pulls you away from the noise, it's an invitation to reflect and ask yourself, who am I doing this for? Is it for people or for Allah alone? Take the example of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. When he was isolated from his people for his unwavering belief in Allah, his solitude became the foundation of his strength. He wasn't concerned about pleasing his community. He was focused solely on earning Allah's pleasure. His isolation wasn't a punishment, it was a gift that allowed his faith to shine brightly. And isn't it the same with us? Think about it. How often do we get caught up in trying to meet the world's expectations? How often do we let others' opinions dictate our self-worth? In isolation, Allah gives you the chance to break free from this trap. Here's a thought. If no one was watching, would you still pray with the same dedication? Would you still give charity? Would you still strive to improve yourself? Isolation reveals your true intentions. It strips away the distractions and leaves you face to face with your sincerity. So the next time you feel alone, remember this: Allah is refining your heart. He's preparing you to act purely for His sake, not for the applause of people. And that is where the real power lies. Reason 7. Isolation prepares you for your unique role. When Allah isolates you, it's not without purpose. He's shaping you for a mission that only you can fulfill. The silence, the loneliness, they are tools in His plan to build something extraordinary within you. Let's reflect on the story of Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him. Thrown into a well by his brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned, his isolation wasn't random. Every moment of solitude prepared him to rise as a leader who would save nations from famine. His time away from the world wasn't a curse. It was training for his destiny. And what about you? Do you ever feel like the path you're on is so different from everyone else's that it's almost unbearable? Like no one understands the weight you're carrying? That's because your journey is unique. Allah isn't isolating you to break you. He's isolating you to prepare you for a role that no one else can fulfill. Maybe you're being strengthened to be the anchor for your family, or perhaps you're meant to be a source of guidance in your community. The world needs people who've walked through fire, faced loneliness, and come out stronger on the other side. Think about it. The most resilient steel is forged in the hottest flames. Your isolation isn't a punishment, it's a process. It's Allah telling you you're being molded for something greater. Trust Him. So the next time you feel cut off from the world, remind yourself that it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, one where your strength and faith will shine brighter than ever. Final thoughts on finding strength in solitude. Imagine standing in a garden during early spring. The seeds you've planted months ago are buried beneath the soil, invisible to the naked eye. You water them daily, but there's no sign of growth yet. Frustration might creep in as you question whether your efforts are in vain. But beneath the surface, those seeds are quietly transforming, sprouting roots, and preparing to break through the soil. Life's waiting periods are like that garden. What we perceive as stagnation is often where the most profound growth happens, hidden from view but essential for the bloom. Trust that Allah is nurturing your roots, even when you can't see it. Explosions of grief and sexual crises can occur at any age if the consequences don't involve action. Think about the journey of a caterpillar. It spends days in a cocoon, seemingly lifeless and still, To the outside world, it might look like nothing is happening. But inside, an incredible transformation is taking place. When the cocoon opens, a butterfly emerges, ready to soar. Your isolation is no different. It's not a void, it's a sacred space where Allah molds you, shapes you, and prepares you to spread your wings. Remember, the stillness isn't permanent, it's a stage of becoming. Sometimes delays feel like barriers, like the universe is against you. But what if every delay is an act of mercy? Prophet Musa spent years away from Egypt before he returned as a leader. That time in the wilderness wasn't a setback, it was preparation. He learned patience, resilience, and leadership while herding sheep. Could it be that the delay in your life is Allah's way of saying, not yet, but soon? Don't underestimate the unseen wisdom in the pause. Trust in His timing. It's always perfect. When we're surrounded by others, it's easy to lose ourselves in their opinions and expectations. But isolation acts like a mirror, reflecting the truest version of who you are. In the silence, you hear your own voice. In the solitude, you reconnect with Allah. Ask yourself, am I seeking the world's approval or Allah's pleasure? Prophet Ibrahim faced isolation when he stood against his people's idolatry. That solitude didn't weaken him, it clarified his purpose and strengthened his faith. Perhaps your isolation is doing the same. No two journeys in life are the same. You might look at others and wonder why their paths seem easier. But remember, Allah tailors each journey to fit the individual. Prophet Yusuf endured betrayal, false accusations, and imprisonment. To outsiders, his life might have looked tragic, but every step prepared him for his unique role as a leader who saved nations. Your trials are equipping you with the skills, strength, and faith needed for the mission Allah has destined for you. Trust the process. Your story is being written with divine care. As we've explored together, isolation isn't a punishment, it's preparation. It's Allah's way of elevating you, refining you, and bringing you closer to Him. Every tear, every moment of loneliness, every silent prayer, it's not wasted. It's all part of a divine plan, one that's shaping you into the person you're meant to be. Remember the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who spent time in the cave of Hira, away from the noise of the world. It was in that solitude that he received the first revelation, the moment that changed the course of humanity forever. Your isolation, too, could be the prelude to something transformative. If this video has resonated with you, I encourage you to reflect in the comments below. Perhaps a simple phrase like, Ya Allah, help me find strength in my solitude, can inspire not just you, but also others who are on this same journey. And before you leave, consider watching the video suggested at the end of this one. It delves into another life-changing topic that I truly believe will complement everything we've discussed today. Click on it and take your next step toward understanding Allah's wisdom in your life. May Allah guide us all, strengthen our faith, and make our trials a means of drawing closer to Him. Ameen. Until next time.